Afternoon and welcome to this week's seminar for the College of Health. My name is Veronica Irvin. I'm faculty in public health, and I'm here to introduce. I'm excited to hear the presentation from Molly Arnowil. Molly earned her MS in quantitative social sciences here at Oregon State University. She was part of an I-Corps team sponsored by NSF that she will discuss, and she has been here since 2021 with the OSU Advantage Accelerator in their Innovation Impact Catalyst Manager. And I have known Molly from some of the training that I did in the accelerator and some of the funding that I received. So I'm very excited for you to hear about all the innovation work that OSU has and how we can partner with the OSU Advantage Accelerator. Hi, Molly.
Fabulous. Thanks, everybody. We got a couple folks in person. We have some people online. Yes, my camera's back here, be going back and forth. But I appreciate all of you being here and joining today, especially when we have a moment of sunshine. So I'll try to make it worth your while here as I talk through some meetings we offer. So as Veronica mentioned, my name's Molly, and I am a member of the Innovation Impact Office. That is kind of our umbrella office. Specifically, I work within the Advantage Accelerator team. So I know across the university, we're used to there's this name, and then there's this one, and there's a sub name. But across the Innovation Impact Office, we are within the Department of Research and Innovation umbrella, and all of our teams work really closely together throughout this whole department. So if at any point you're like, I'm talking to someone from this office, but I'm trying to get in touch with Molly, they know me, right? So we interact a lot. I'm sure the same way it is at your college. But today I want to talk with you about some of the resources that we have to help researchers and folks within the various colleges extend your impact, right? Beyond just a academic setting or a classroom setting. And our tool for doing that is innovation and entrepreneurial activities. So if any point in this conversation I'm saying I&E, that's the innovation and entrepreneurship. So most of my presentation is going to focus more in on what we do with the Advantage Accelerator. But if there are other questions about what our larger office does, I'm happy to support you there. So what that might look like is if you have intellectual property, that's what our extended team would help with, right? Or if you are doing contracting with an outside organization, and they're like funding you, that could be something that our team can help with as well. But I want to talk first. I'm like not used to dragging Zoom on a different setting. There we go. I want to, again, I covered most of this, but just to make it clear, since I was talking about some of the different groups within our larger team, I want to focus in on exactly what we do at the Advantage Accelerator. So we are an innovation development center. We support primarily faculty and staff, but we also have opportunities for students as well. And our means through which we support these parties are kind of as follows. There's entrepreneurial training, which I'll break down kind of what that looks like and how you could get involved in it. And it's really teaching a process to help you develop a successful business model. And I think a lot of times people are like, I am in academia, or like I'm a tenured professor, or I plan to go on and do a postdoc. Like I'm not sure I need to think about through the lens of a business model. But really, I think if you were to come through a program, you'd see a lot in your belts in the sense of you are seeing what the need is in the community, identifying problems, and then addressing those problems, just using a different tool set than maybe you would in your traditional research book. We provide access to resources such as student interns who can support you. We have a large pool of mentors from industry we work with, and also connecting with potential customers if you have an idea that you end up bringing to the market. And then finally, a thing that I know has to be on everybody's radar is some access to funding as well. I'll touch a little bit on the government funding. I mean, knowing full disclosure that there's a lot of uncertainty in that realm right now. But I'll also talk about some opportunities at more of the OSU level that they can support you. And Veronica could be a great person to connect with about what her experience was there. Okay. So first is talking about kind of informational and preparation programs we have. These I think about more as like precursors to if you just want to like dip your toes in a little bit and get a feel for what it is that we do. And we have Iterate, which is a 2-hour workshop. We kind of revamped it this year. Thinking about this as a sorting hat. So if you have an idea and you're like, I'm not really sure where I should go with this idea, we would invite you to come to Iterate. We're aiming to start hosting it monthly, starting in the new year, but we have one coming up. I believe it's next week as well. Within this, it'll cover materials similar to what I'm covering right now, but will help identify the next step for your concept, whether it's talking to a licensing manager to work on protecting your idea, or if it's like a programmatic next step as well. Moxie is a program that I'm really excited about. We are in the throes of this right now. It is a program we developed in 2023 to address a need that we saw on campus. And at the time, it was that women who were participating in entrepreneurial activities weren't represented across campus in the same way that the actual population was present. So we wanted to figure out what that the numbers of women who are participating are matching the population. So we built a program, piloting it, specifically focusing on women initially, and then we've expanded it to invite other people who might not identify as an entrepreneur or an innovator, because that was one of the big barriers that we saw is initially with women and then with other populations as well, that they were like, I'm not an innovator. That's not me. And then we would talk to them and they would have all of these great ideas and be really scrappy with how they're finding funding and how they're solving problems. And we as people who work in this space, we're like, you're totally an innovator. And they're like, no, I need to read more books about it, or I need to watch more videos about it. So we developed programming to help address that kind of confidence gap and the need there. Okay. And then finally, what I want to talk about here is a program called PTI. It stands for Promotion and Tenure, Innovation and Entrepreneurship. Essentially what PTI is a program that OSU has led the charge in, and it is getting innovation and entrepreneurship recognized in the promotion and tenure process. That's been a big barrier that was witnessed across the university, which is people, if you are going up for tenure, that's obviously going to be your focus, and it's going to be hard to bring in and essentially have the bandwidth to work on your really innovative, exciting concept that you've developed at OSU if you're focused fully on tenure and the innovation and entrepreneurship isn't recognized there. That is all a bunch of background to say that OSU has been leading the charge, certainly in our university, but across the country, nationwide, to change how promotion and tenure packets are evaluated. And the benefit there is that you develop something in OSU, it isn't just relying on OSU reviewers, right? You have to have that whole systematic change so that external reviewers are considering the same things. So all of that to say, that's just a really exciting program or effort that OSU is that can support folks. And this is our kind of first bucket. The next I want to talk about more of our primary programs. And this is a really good way for people to get involved here. So I'll just kind of break it down into how these programs flow together. And then we'll kind of keep going. At any point online or in person, people have questions. We're a small enough group that just like chime in. I would love questions. So primary programs. The first is the Accelerator Innovation Development Fund. I feel like it would be helpful to have funds here. This is a pot of money that our team allocates or makes awards from every academic term, is with the exception of summer. So each term we make generally 4 $15,000 awards that will support people who are developing their OSU intellectual property. So Veronica has received this funding. Other folks in the College of Health have received it. It is not just STEM and engineering type folks, right? We've had people from every single college on campus who have received these funds. And the money is intended to help people reach a significant commercialization milestone that you identify as being significant. So that could be for prototyping. It could be for paying for supplies or developing your concept. It could be paying student workers to help you reach whatever the milestone is that you've identified. Whereas I feel like there's a really low barrier to entry for applying for these funds. It's a Google so it's not something where you're like, I have to put in a full work week to get all the information across. I would love to talk to anybody on the call about the aid funds if that's something you think you'd be interested in. Follow up. So the aid funds, one of the requirements of accepting those funds, I guess kind of two big things. One, it has to have OSU intellectual property. So it's if you've developed something at OSU, that would qualify for OSU intellectual property. Right? The second thing is that you would be required to participate in the entrepreneurial trainings that we provide, right? Because it kind of gives you the structure to learn this new skill set. And the next few bullet points really outline what those programs are. So the first is the Regional I-Corps program. This is an NSF program where it's 4 workshops. They're 2 hours each. And within that workshop, what we're really hone in on is helping you identify your what we call a value proposition. So this is what value you would bring to the customer. What problem are you solving? Okay. And then the other part is who your customer is, right? So who is the person who has that problem? That sounds really, really, really simple, and in some ways it is. But we have a whole process through which you can validate those 2 buckets, if you will, right? You're going out and you're talking to people, and you're learning from the feedback that they provide for you. So after you do the 4 workshops of the Regional I-Corps program, then you would continue on to Accelerate, which is an additional 5-week program. So it's a total of 9 weeks of programming where we meet over Zoom once a week for 2 hours, and then you would have some homework. But Accelerate follows up on what you've learned in the I-Corps program, and it actually helps you kind of develop a rudimentary business model. So you've identified the problem, you've identified who you're solving the problem for. In I-Corps, Accelerate then kind of helps you take that to the next level of like, how would you actually deliver on solving that problem, right? What's your market size and more of the logistics of the business behind that. And finally is a program called Launch. This is, I guess, kind of our highest level programming where it's more of a one-on-one and a consultation model where we work with teams for anywhere from 1 to 2 years to help them really bring their concept to the market. So these classes build on each other, and we don't expect anyone who's coming into our programs to have any background with this, right? It's not something that you need to like have a business person on your team or any previous experience. What questions so far, if any? Hopefully I'm not talking like a mile a minute. I had some caffeine before this.
I'll ask this, Veronica. Which one should you start with? How could you reach out? Are you going to cover that piece?
Yeah, yes, that's a great question. So what I would recommend, and it probably would have been helpful if I had moved this around on my slides a little bit, is going to iterate, because that's just the 2-hour workshop, and we can work with you directly to be like, this is where you're at. Because some people come through and they're like, I want to have maybe like a nonprofit. And at that point, we could say, we might not be the best fit for you, but there are community resources as well. So in Iterate, it's pointing to our resources, but also to those outside of OSU. We don't want to be gatekeepers. We're not the only people who have resources available. I would have questions. I don't see anything in the chat, but that you don't want to manage that. Right. So just a couple more programs that we have. I'll go through these pretty quickly. One is we call it a speaker series. We aim to offer this a couple times per term, and it's where we bring in an expert in a given field to essentially give a lecture, right? So we've had people who are specialists in government funding come and give presentations or in grants, right? We've had people who are FDA pathway experts and can give advice in that sense. We've had CPAs come through to help understand, like, at what point do you actually need an accountant, or are you just wasting money, right? So just really listening to the people we work with to see what is it that they need, and bringing people to talk about that. Some other resources that could be on your radar. One is a commercialization space program. Something that has come up is that folks will say, like, I'm worried about the conflict of interest if I am trying to commercialize something, because I need lab space and tools that I have in my lab at OSU working on something that could have benefits for me personally, right? The commercialization space program is essentially a space use program that we help develop and kind of navigate, where you can more or less rent part of your lab space for your commercialization plans. So this is something that our office would help you work with leadership at your college level to kind of formalize that agreement. But especially when people have like specialty tools that they need to use, this can be really helpful because it avoids you having to have duplicates of the same resource when one's available right there. Similarly, sometimes government grants require that you have a lab space, and this is where you can kind of meet that requirement without the conflict of interest being a huge issue. The UVDF Impact Fund. This is the University Visitor Development Fund. This would almost be like a follow-on to the aid funds. I'll only speak about it briefly because I know this is kind of an introductory course or info session. But this is just to show that there are additional funds that can kind of bridge the gap between an aid award and a government level grant. So this is a $60,000 investment that the university would make in a company that is spinning out of OSU. And we typically make these about twice a year. So again, it's just showing that the university is here to support people who are developing and commercializing the work that they've developed here. And finally, here is the University Summer Investment Opportunity. This is where we work with universities from across the state, so state universities. And we work with companies who are developing intellectual property from their respective colleges or universities, and we run them through a due diligence process in the summer, where we are working with interns who are pressing questions so that people can have really polished pitch decks in advance of going before a team of investors. So again, this is just to kind of like show the pathway. I feel like it's kind of grim to be like, we are cradle to grave, because hopefully it won't be like a grave where your startup doesn't get its feet off the ground. But realistically, that is a common thing. So we just are here to support people from the moment they come up with their concept to wherever it is they go with it. One of the final things I want to talk about, again, is the funding pathways, just because a lot of times people are like, how do I get money to do this? Like, what can I do? A really good first step is that aid fund that I mentioned. This is an award in that you don't have to pay it back. There is no personal liability for these funds. The deliverables are just what we work with you to identify. Typically 6-month projects, and it's a really good opportunity to get a small cache of funds to gain some momentum. we just discussed the UVDF impact funds, but there's also some at the state level that can support people. So Business Oregon is the state entity that handles the additional funding here. Some things that are really exciting about this that not every state has. Through Business Oregon, you can get what's called a Phase 0 grant. And that is if you're planning to go on and apply for one of these federal SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research grants. If you're planning to apply for one of these larger awards, the state will give you $5,000 to get a grant writer or whatever it is that you want to use those funds for to support your application at the federal level. And then let's say you use those $5,000, you successfully apply for an SBIR grant, but maybe it has stipulations about there being matching funds. Business Oregon can also issue matching funds for federal grants. So there's a lot of ways at the state level that you can stretch federal grant dollars further, right, to support your concepts. SBIR awards, these are federal levels. STTR is Small Business Tech Transfer Research. There's some differences within there. We don't have to get into the nuance of it today. But just know that with these awards, it is federal dollars that are intended to help you de-risk your technology and prove out a prototype. So the funds, I think, are neat because it's the stipulations or structure around them. You can't use it to pay legal fees, but you should use it to do testing to be like, does what I built, does it actually do what I thought it did, right? So it can help you be a little bit more risky in figuring out what it is that you're working on, which is exciting. Before I talk with our next slide, I want to say, are there any students here? Okay. I'm going to keep this. Oh, are there? I just noticed Sarah's one. Right. Can you give some examples? I'm going to answer this question real quick. Can you give some examples of what qualifies as work from OSU as an innovative idea? Definitely. So let's say that Veronica, can you maybe share your concept?
Sure.
I know it's kind of different.
Yeah. We have one IP product that we took information that we learned through an NIH grant and developed around, honestly, about well water education and treatment. And we created an interactive app and website for individuals in the community and through extension to use. So we did an accelerator training. We received some aid funding to work on some testing of it in certain groups. We actually had an idea for an SBIR STTR grant this year that, of course, was closed before they allowed. So ours was decision-making tools, so apps, websites that we're building with information that we're gathering and learning from our grants.
Great. So there is one example from your college. Another one, it's also app-based, was like a public safety app for if you are in the throes of an emergency, whether it's the big one, right, or like an active shooter situation. This team was working with safety managers on campus and at a level to provide resources that they can shoot through a phone app. Some other examples.
I can think of ones that are in my cohort. Oh, that would be great. Ideas for new vaccinations. This is not in our college, but ideas for new devices. So a new vaccination, a new way to screen for vaccines, or and that was definitely one. And then there was definitely some around a technical piece that they were looking to produce.
Yeah, those are great examples. So kind of similarly, thinking about our current cohort, these comes where people have developed screening tools for sorting grass seed more efficiently. People have developed therapeutics and brought it through. People have brought through all kinds of apps that are available. It could be a widget, right? So the concept here is typically when you think about this, it is something that could potentially have commercial potential. If you're I don't know how I would address that, we can help you with that. If we need looking at solving problems that we face in society. One exception here is like we don't typically fund like curriculum development. And that's not to say that it isn't valuable. Certainly, we're at the university, we know it is, but it's more thinking about the commercial application of it. There has to be a market that can support it. So Kelly online, does that answer your question? Right. So quickly, just why students, if there's students online, why that could be helpful. I think in recent years, we've certainly all experienced that the economy is changing at a rapid pace, and it's likely going to continue to do that, right? So being able to think, and part of this, I think, can move beyond just students, could be anyone. Being able to think in an innovative way and think in an entrepreneurial way could really make you career resilient, right? It'll allow you to look at problems in a certain way, like who is it actually solving this problem for, right? What are the implications of what it is that you're doing? We have found that employers tend to be more attracted to graduates who have I&E skills because they are able to think creatively and be flexible, right? And look at problems in different ways. And typically they pay more to graduates who have those skills. One of the big things that we push, this is more at an undergrad level though, is like, if you have the time right now, like do it now versus if you were like working a full-time position, it's much harder to find the time and ways to get involved in this type of work. You could say students can do the aid part. That's a great question. So the aid funds are not available to students. There's some nuance there. So undergrad students, since they are paying to go to OSU, they own their own intellectual property. And the aid funds explicitly are intended to advance OSU-owned intellectual property. So to be eligible for the aid funds, you would have to have OSU IP, and we need to have a faculty member associated with the project who we can route an index to. And that's just kind of like a house cleaning component. Certainly, though, if there is a grad student who is in a lab and the lab has developed something, then now it could be a pathway for them. We can do this afterwards, but this is why our team and our contact info within the Advantage Accelerator, we're a pretty small team, which I think makes us really nimble. So if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us and we can get back to you really quickly. Similarly, we are a little bit more public facing than some of our colleagues. So we are able to route you to the proper person. So if you had a question about like, does this qualify as IP? We can certainly take a first stab at answering that, but we can put you to the other people and resources of us. And then I have some links, but essentially, if you were to like Google OSU Advantage Accelerator, you will find our webpage. And then after this, I'm happy to share these slides, information as well. Again, I just wanted to give you an idea of some of the resources that are available on campus and how it can help you move your ideas forward. And that's all I got. I don't welcome any questions that folks have. If there are no questions, you can have some time back to enjoy the fleeting sunshine we have and focus on the time we've done.
How about this? For students, do you partner with any courses? Are there any courses that students want to learn a little bit more, get more experience? Do you recommend any courses that might talk about this or where you might work with that course?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are, at the undergrad level, there are resources available in the College of Business. And I'm pretty sure that they are starting up an innovation and entrepreneurship major. I think it had been a minor, but certainly the classes are available to go through at that level if you want to take like a course for credit. The programs that we offer aren't something that you would like register for through the university system. It would just be like our separate kind of portal, if you will. So it isn't like you have to pay tuition to come and participate with us. And I feel like that would probably be the better option for graduate students. But with all of our programs, you have to have an idea to participate in. So it's less of like, I'm going to teach you the basics. That I think business school would be a better option for. But if you have an idea that you want to work on and focus on, that's where I think we can be a good fit.
So I took the accelerator program, and I think at the end they decided what I want to do is more about just create a YouTube series with what I want. Like, I just want to teach research education to people who don't go to R1 schools. And they said it's better to just do a YouTube series instead of like doing something else. I had no idea about any of this before the program. So, and I was curious, do you have any resources? But from what I understand, they said you should be like a public-facing professional or something like that. And they said you should just give talks and do YouTube videos. So do you have any resources for that kind of a training, which is very different from, creating a product and then going to like try to sell it?
I feel like this was one that hadn't been on my radar a ton until recently, but the Story Lab on campus, fabulous. They the Prosperity widely shared summit that was a couple of weeks ago, and they did a session that I thought was just phenomenal. That was talking about they were talking about in the realm of when you're describing your research to people, the importance of having a story arc and identifying like who are the characters, what's like the big challenge they're coming up against, and like what the ideal like, resolution to that would be. But I think just, again, in the fact that it was so compelling how they spoke about it, that I'm still thinking about it right off the top of my head 2 weeks later, that they could be a really good resource for you.
I don't really have a question, but maybe you can speak to what I'm observing. So there's instability in the government sector, instability in industry. And so as I work in a lab, and a thought is we could offer our services to businesses, fee for service type of is maybe like what are you seeing in the shifting currents of funding and whatnot, and what needs are there?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I feel like we are still early enough in kind of the uncertainty phase that like the full kind of ramifications haven't come across, but like on like one small level in the fall, we had more applications for the aid fund than we'd ever had in the fall before, which I feel like is a indicator that people are sort of like, okay, what's happening? What funded? But in terms of thinking about like the uncertainty component, something we always like to stress is that our goal is not for people to leave academia. Our goal is for people to develop your idea that you've developed here is to like get it to a point that you could sell it, someone else can drive it, and then you can go back to the lab and like keep on using your powerful brains to come up with more ideas. And there's several examples of that at the university in terms of people who have thought really creatively and solved a problem and then advanced their business to a certain point and developed a team that's continuing to drive it. And then they're going back to the lab and doing more innovation. So I feel like that is one model. Similarly, we've had people who have built the fee for service model. And I think some of the takeaways there is that the framework that we teach can still apply there. Because in order to like be providing a service, you need to figure out like what's the exact service that people need, where's the gap where your skills can fit, and who's the customer who most needs that, so that when you're speaking to them, you can address what their needs are. And I think it's important So that's one part. But also one of our things with our programming that we really focus on is like doing this kind of thought work early, because it saves you wasting a ton of resources on something, on an idea that might not have legs, right? So it gets you to where you can not put a bunch of time and monetary resources into something if the problem isn't what we thought it was. That makes sense. Does that help?
Yeah.
It's fine if the answer is no. I can take another push at it.
I'm like in those thinking stages right now, and it's really difficult as I feel like I don't have enough information to really move forward meaningfully.
Who's the type of information? Like what type of information?
What customers would want, and are we able to deliver that?
But yeah. So the tool that we use for answering that question, because that is a big question that almost everyone comes in, we call it customer discovery, which is where you're going out and you're talking. First, you're making hypotheses. Like, this is who I think has the problem. This is what I think their problem is. You have to validate that. So then you go out and you talk to people who are working in that space. You're like, tell me about your workflows. What's the least efficient part of your workflow? What would be a meaningful increase in that workflow? And that can help you validate those kind of educated guesses you're making about what you think is a problem. But it can also give you targets to aim for. Because if they're like, doing this 3% more efficiently would be huge for us. And you're like, oh, I can do it 8%. And I thought that wasn't enough. But it turns out that that's awesome. That will like help you know that you don't just need to go back to the lab and keep tinkering to get it up to 10% more efficient when like 3% is enough that people are going to be able to jazzed. So the big thing that we push is customer discovery, which is going out and having open-ended conversations with people. And it's avoiding being like, hey, I've got this widget. Would you pay $10 for it? Because people are going to be like, yeah, sure. Like, okay, great. No, we always say like, no one's going to tell you your baby's ugly, but probably the nicer version is like, no one's going to tell you your hat is ugly. But that would be what I would recommend. And we have resources that can help you with that. So if you end up taking that route.
Would that be the Tenure?
It would more likely, I would say, do the I-Cord program, because that's just a 4-week and once a week thing. And there's like a deliverable each week where you're expected to have a certain number of interviews. And I feel like that structure really helps people gain some conversations. Yeah, of course. And we are going to be offering that again in the winter term, and the application is open now. So see me after class, and I give you my email address. But I'm sure after this we can share my contact info.
Oh, I don't have a question, but I just, this is Veronica going through the process. I would just give some advice. The word conflict of interest gets mentioned a lot, and it is okay to have a conflict of interest. It comes off as a bad thing, but it is not. And so you just have to know if you have a conflict of interest, declare it, do mitigation, like a plan so that you don't make decisions with the conflict of interest or it's known. We have a whole office here, conflict of interest office. They're very lovely to work with. And having a conflict of interest has been around for decades at medical schools and totally acceptable. So if you hear the word, you'll have a conflict of interest, that is okay.
Yes, thank you. That's a great. Thank you for appreciate that.
It's kind of ironic that we're all women.
Moxie.
But on the OSU,
It is. So right now we are hosting Moxie every other year. Pending funding, we might be able to up the frequency with which we offer it. But Moxie, a little bit more info on that. It's a 15-month program, which sounds like, oh, that's super daunting. But a lot of it is kind of set at your own pace. So it's broken into 3 stages. There is Educate, which is there are 8 or 9 weeks where we meet once a week and we kind of have a seminar set up where we bring in people who can help sort of level set to make sure we're all speaking the same language and identifying the same kind of problems that we need to focus on. And again, that's focusing on your own problem that you're working on. After Educate is called Engage, and that is where we partnered you with a one-on-one mentor who you work with to lead a 9-month action plan that is specific to your needs and a significant milestones for your concept. And finally is the Execute phase, where you're actually acting on that action plan that you put together. Our team meets with each of the participants throughout all of those phases, just to check in on how you're doing, make sure you're making progress. It's a really cool program in that it's the focus of it, but also like the approach is kind of a little bit different in that, like, to acknowledge that this is like one more thing that we're putting on people's plate. There is like a $4,000 stipend that's associated with it. Just to acknowledge that people are putting time and effort into this work.